Perfect.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Sorry about
Thanks,
that.
Liz.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I am back. My name is Natalia. I'm an immigration attorney with McKinsey. And we're here today to talk about immigration news. As you may have noticed, we live in the unprecedented times. We have a lot of immigration news to cover, and they keep coming every single day. So let's start with the immigration updates. And just to remind you, this is the first Fridays event that we host every single month to keep you updated on the immigration news, answer your questions, and just be here to say hi if we don't have a lot of immigration news for you. But that's not the case today. We have a lot. All right, so the alien registration starts today on April 11th. And this is a new development. This is actually a final rule that was published in the Federal Register. So this is something that you need to know absolutely. We've been looking at the requirements for as long as this rule was pending, but as of today, the rule is final, so we can talk about it today. So the new registration requirement applies to individuals aged 14 or older, those non-US citizens who were not fingerprinted or registered when applying for US visas, and who plan to stay in the United States for 30 days or longer now must register before the expiration of the 30 days. Children under 14, there was a general rule that children under 14 didn't need to be fingerprinted. So even if children were applying with their parents for immigration benefit in the US, were not required to get fingerprinted, but then once they turned 14, they had to submit their fingerprints. So now the rule has changed in regard to the children in terms of the Alien Registration Act. So parents or legal guardians must register their children who were not registered upon the visa application or who will remain in the US for at least 30 days or longer must register before the expiration of the 30 days. Those children who previously were not fingerprinted and they're turning 14, they must re-register and provide fingerprints within 30 days after their 14th birthday. So this is now is the requirement, and the USCIS announcement specifically notices that the following groups are not considered to be registered. So first of all, people who entered the US without inspection. That includes people who entered the US without presenting a visa, let's say, or a travel document, or a certain permission, a border crossing card to enter the United States. Entering without inspection basically means entering without seeing a CBP officer at the border or at the port of entry. Another category that is considered not to be registered as of now, and those will need to get registered, are Canadians who entered at a land port and were not issued evidence of registration. Often Canadians don't use visas necessarily to enter the United States because of the existing agreement between Canada and the US. So those Canadians who entered at a land port and were not issued evidence of registration now have to register if they plan to stay in the United States for 30 days or longer. And another group is people who applied for immigration benefit not listed in the regulations. So I can give you an example. So for example, those who applied for DACA or for TPS, they are not considered to be registered. DACA applicants, for example, they filed an application for deferred action, and they filed sometimes applications for work authorization and for a travel document, but they're not considered to be registered, so they will have to get registered if they stay in the United States for 30 days or longer. So if they plan to stay in the United States for 30 days or longer. And the rule is in effect as of today. Also, according to the final rule, any non-citizen required to register who is 18 years of age and older and who fails to comply with the requirement that they need to carry evidence of registration, they will be fined according to this new rule, and the fine will not exceed $5,000. There is also a possible imprisonment, not for more than 30 days, or both could be applied to people who fail to register. Another reminder that we have for foreign nationals is to update their address with the USCIS, with the immigration court if they have the case pending before the immigration court, and with the ICE if the ICE is actually monitoring your case. For example, if you entered through Mexico, through the southern border, then more than likely ICE has your file and you will have to update ICE on your new address also within about a week. If you are a permanent resident, this rule applies to you as well. So if you had a case filed with the USCIS, then you'll need to update the USCIS. If you're a permanent resident, you don't have to update the immigration court necessarily, unless you have case pending before the immigration court or admin closed in immigration court. So if you deal with the immigration court or ICE agents, then our recommendation to update your address with them as well. Such reminders were sent out by a lot of employers in the US to their employees who are foreign nationals, including permanent residents. So that was a very nice move by those companies to take care of their employees and let them know that they need to update their address with the USCIS. Also, the H-1B CAP registration selections have been made, and now most of people know if they were selected or were not selected. So if you were not selected in this lottery, what should you do? Our recommendation is to take a look at the blog that we posted on our website. We talk specifically about potential options. If you were not selected, reach out to us. We can always discuss potential options with you based on employment or family petitions, if that applies. The blog that we have on our website is amazing, and it will provide you with a lot of information on the lottery selections and also your potential options. Another news we received is about the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, that will be checking the social media accounts of foreign nationals for anti-Semitism. So that came in on April 9th, 2 days ago, and this is something that this administration will put a lot of resources into, and they will definitely go ahead and check the social media accounts. So be sure to check your social media accounts if you are a foreign national applying for any benefit in the United States. If you have any questions, please let us know. We're here to help. Another piece of news that we received relatively recently at the end of March is the news of the termination of the parole program for 4 countries: Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. So the parole process was authorized by the USCIS in 2022 and then in 2023, and a lot of people came using the parole travel authorization to the United States. This administration is terminating this parole program as of March 25th of 2025. That's very sad news and definitely disappointing, because there are a lot of people in the US already who have, entered the US using that travel authorization. There are a lot of people outside of the US who had their applications pending. So now that this program has been terminated, our advice for people is to explore other options, take a look at other potential immigration options and see if they qualify, for example, for asylum or for a family based immigration case. And we are here to help. If you need us to assess your case, we can do that for sure. But if you already have some application or petition pending, you probably have received an immigration advice already if you have something outside of the parole program. If you do not, you should act quickly, because the names of people who use the parole program to enter the United States are in the DHS's system, and ICE will act quickly and will definitely take a look at this list. Another piece of news that we received most recently is that the immigration courts in the United States will be reopening cases that were administratively closed in immigration court. As immigration attorneys, we very often file motions to close immigration removal cases in immigration court administratively to allow people file their applications with the USCIS and kind of go through this administrative process with the USCIS, and meanwhile have their case in immigration court administratively closed. So what this administration is doing, it's instructing the immigration court to reopen the admin closed cases, schedule hearings, have people come in person. Previously, a lot of hearings were scheduled online through WebEx. As of now, the immigration court is sending updated notices for in-person hearings in immigration court. So keep an eye on any notices that come in and make sure to read them through so that you understand if this case is still administratively closed or it was opened and now you have a hearing that you need to attend in person. We do represent people in immigration court, as well as we work with the federal courts in the US. But please keep an eye on your case in immigration court, as the immigration courts in the US are now having new procedures, and we started receiving notices from the immigration court for certain cases where the immigration judges outline additional requirements that would apply to the cases, new deadlines to submit documents. All of this is definitely new and some of the most recent developments in immigration court. We also have been hearing news about visa revocations and SEVIS terminations that concerns international students, those who are here on F1 visas. The DHS is revoking visas and ICE is terminating SEVIS. So that basically means that ICE is terminating F1 status for international students. These days, as of this week, there were a lot of reports coming in from different universities throughout the US, and all the reports basically say that DHS and ICE are targeting people who have traffic violations, speeding tickets, minor misdemeanors, or people who even have their cases dismissed, their criminal cases dismissed, among others. And a couple of things here in regard to the status termination by ICE. no grace period will be given to those whose status got terminated. Normally, international students have a grace period after their authorized stay here expires, but if their status gets terminated, then no grace period will be available to those people. But there could be an option to file for a reinstatement of the status with the USCIS. Another obvious option is obviously to depart the US, reapply for a visa from outside of the US, and then hopefully come back. For those who may qualify for other immigration benefits, those can definitely defend their cases in immigration court if the DHS issues them notices to appear in removal proceedings in front of immigration judge. So this is relatively new, and I'm sure that there will be some federal litigation in place relatively quickly, maybe even by the end of this week. Something will be filed with the federal courts to stop these terminations and revocations from happening. Also, the Trump's administration is working on a plan to fine people who are present in the United States without proper immigration documents. They plan to fine them for each day of their unlawful presence in the U.S. As of now, this is just a plan, and I personally will be curious to see what's going on with it and what it's going to look like. And it does not seem feasible at the moment, but that's definitely something that this administration has in mind. Like I said, all of this news are most of this, what's happening in the field of immigration is definitely either shocking or definitely we have not seen that many, service termination cases or visa revocations previously done by the government, but we live in unprecedented times. And I think what's important here is to know your rights when it comes to the ICE officers or the CBP. The CBP continues being aggressive at the border, checking foreign nationals' files, putting people in secondary inspection. I would like to note that the CBP has a lot of discretion when it comes to people who are seeking admission in the US, and they definitely have the authority to place people in the secondary inspection to go through their immigration files. This is not new, but the CBP has started doing that more often, and we definitely see reports coming in from immigration attorneys, and that's alarming. Keep in mind that there are also Know Your Rights brochures that are relevant to the CBP and the dealings with the CBP at the airports or the ports of entry. I would advise to check on them if you're a permanent resident or if you have a visa. Then this resource would be extremely useful for you. There are also Know Your Rights brochures in regard to the ICE officers and any interactions with the ICE officers that could be useful. All right, let's talk about the questions that we received. We have several questions here that I will be covering. So the very first one is, my son is on F1 visa from Nigeria that will expire in May. Will the current administration affect his status? It's hard to predict what will happen in a particular case without knowing the details and the background story here. But like I said, this administration has started its actions, aimed at the international students, and we've seen a lot of reports where they are terminating their status or revoking visas. If the visa is revoked, that doesn't necessarily mean that the status is terminated. The F1 status is terminated for someone who is in the US and is in school. But what it essentially means is that the DHS can initiate removal proceedings, but I cannot see how they can justify it necessarily if the visa was revoked, but the status is still in place. When the visa is revoked, what it means in most of the cases is that if the international student exits the US, then that person wouldn't be able to come back to the US because there would be no visa to use to present themselves for the CBP for CBP's inspection at the border. So people will have to reapply for new visas. But if the student status is terminated in the US, that is really bad news because the person would need to leave the United States, and more than likely visa would be eventually canceled for that person. Hopefully nothing like that happens to your son, and he will be fine. If his visa expires in May, that doesn't necessarily mean that his status will expire in May. So I would take a look at his Form I-20 from the university and just double check with the designated school official what's going on in terms of his status rather than his visa. The second question we have here is, can someone travel to the US as a tourist if they have a pending Form I-130? The answer to this question is yes, if that someone has a valid visa to enter the United States or an ESTA authorization to enter the United States, and if this person is admissible and no ground of inadmissibility applies in a specific case. Just having the Form I-130 pending with the USCIS doesn't necessarily mean that the person cannot use his or her visa, valid visa, or an ESTA authorization to travel to the United States, as long as the purpose of the trip is, if you have a B visa, it's for either business or pleasure. If you have an ESTA, same purpose of travel applies. But if your purpose to travel to the US is to live in the US, then obviously you wouldn't be able to tell that to the CBP and use a B visa or an ESTA to travel to the US. But there is nothing in regulations that says that a person who has a pending Form I-130 petition with the US, filed with the USCIS, cannot travel to the United States on a valid visa. Okay, moving on to the next question. When completing an ESTA application as a tourist without a US person to put as a contact, what should I note on that form? If you don't have any US person, in the US who you can put as a contact, then you would just not do that, and you would say that you do not have contact in the US. We very rarely help people with ESTA applications because they are simplified application forms. But if you don't have a US person to put as a contact, there's nothing else you can really do. If there is no one, then the answer would be, I do not have such a person in the US. Next, how can I check the results of the H-1B lottery to see if I was selected? I assume this question is coming from a beneficiary, not from the employer. So the results of the H-1B lottery are only available to legal representatives, such as attorneys or the petitioners themselves through their USCIS account. The beneficiaries, so foreign nationals, do not have a way to check on the H-1B lottery results unless they have the credentials that technically should belong to the petitioners. H-1B process is an employer-driven process, so please check in with the entities that petitioned for you, or with the legal representatives who represent the petitioners, but you would need to do it through the petitioners because of the relationship between the attorneys and the petitioners in this case. All right, I see that a question came in here in Instagram. Let me find it. Can DACA students travel within the United States? Is there ICE agents in the airports? I am pretty sure that ICE agents may be present at the airports, or CBP agents work closely with the ICE agents. The CBP agents are the Customs and Border Protection officers, and they are definitely present at the airport. They can get in touch with the ICE officers pretty quickly. And as of today, they definitely been doing that. They do that, and they will be doing that. As for your question, if a DACA student can travel within the US, if you have a valid form of ID, a state ID or a driver's license, the travel is still allowed within the US with that document. But keep in mind, if you're traveling to, let's say, Hawaii, your plane can be easily rerouted and end up in Mexico or elsewhere. And then you would need a permission to board the plane again and travel back to the United States. If you don't have an advance parole as a DACA recipient, that will be impossible for you to travel back to the US from outside of the US. If you have a valid DACA status and a valid form of ID, such as a driver's license or state ID, and you're pretty sure that the plane will not be rerouted elsewhere outside of the US, then I would say you can travel as of now within the US. But keep in mind, certain risks. If you travel to, let's say, Florida, the plane may end up elsewhere, may land elsewhere, or if you travel to Hawaii. It happens pretty often that people find themselves outside the US. All right, let's see if I have any other questions here. All right, one question I have here what's the difference between a F1 visa revocation and the service termination? So I think I answered that question earlier. I don't see any other questions here, and I think we covered all the news that we had in mind for today. Just want to say to you all, stay safe and definitely know your rights when it comes to the CBP inspection, dealing with the CBP officers at the border, and definitely check the Know Your Rights brochures in terms of the dealings with the ICE officers. Okay, there's one more question that just came in. Does someone coming into the US with an ESTA from the European Union need to register? That's a good question. So an ESTA travelers were not mentioned among people who are not considered registered. So ESTA would mean that people are registered. We will need to see how the CBP reacts to it as well. This is a relatively new rule, and we will see how it's being implemented in the US. But based on the rule that is in place now, it looks like ESTA travelers are registered and are considered registered, but we are yet to see how the Department of Homeland Security will be actually applying this rule that has become final. And as far as I can see, this administration is sometimes overstepping in terms of what's allowed, what's not allowed, what's legal and what's not. we're yet to see how this rule will be implemented in practice. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining this call. We'll be back with the news next month. Someone else from our firm will be presenting. And if you have any questions, feel free to email your questions to us so we could take a look at them and definitely cover them moving forward. Thank you, everyone.